Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the HCMG State of Human Capital Management in Government, sponsored by Cornerstone OnDemand. My name is Andrew Greisman, WBR Insights Senior Analyst for HCMG, and I'll be moderating this presentation. Before we dive in, I'd like to bring your attention to the console in front of you. The windows or widgets laid out on the screen are customizable, meaning you can move these around to maximize, minimize, or reposition them to fit whatever device you're using to connect with us. Please refer to the Resource Center to download the newly published benchmark report that our presentation is based off of. We're going to try and save 15 minutes or so at the end of today's discussion for a live Q&A session. So at any point during the discussion, feel free to submit questions using that specific portal. Lastly, we have a few polls set up throughout today's webinar, so once they appear on your screen, simply click your response and hit submit, and then we'll tally up the results. All right, with that, let's go forward and meet our panelists. First, I would like to state as a disclaimer that our contributors are speaking on their own behalf as thought leaders today with us, and that their views are not necessarily those of their agencies. With that in mind, today we have Beverly Barr, who is the training supervisor for the City of San Diego's Public Works Department. Please say hello to everybody, Beverly.
Hello, how are you?
We also have Tawana Townsend, who's a career management specialist for Army Career Program 16, Engineers and Scientists, Non-Construction versus AMCOM PAO at the Public Affairs Office.
Good afternoon.
We also have Samantha Cutler, Esquire, who's Director of Workforce Relations Division in the Office of Human Resources at the U.S. Department of Education.
Hello, everyone.
We also have joining us today Jennifer McDowell, who's a USDA Forest Service Customer Experience Champion.
Hi, everyone.
And lastly, before I reintroduce myself, Steve Dabrowski, who's the Senior Principal for Thought Leadership and Advisory Services at Cornerstone OnDemand.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here today.
And again, I'm Andrew Greisman, Senior Analyst for HCMG at WBR Insights. So let's get started looking at some key trends for our presentation today. These are trends that we've identified in our research report, and for context, this is now the 6th year that HCMG and Cornerstone OnDemand have released our research benchmarking human capital management for government. It's become a staple of our research programming year over year. Each year, we augment our focus while benchmarking metrics like performance on key priorities such as succession planning and retention activities. This year, we focused on technology and the impact of changing solutions available to agencies in today's market. So with that in mind, here are 3 key trends that we've identified for this year. One is digital transformation, which has now become more important than ever before. 2 is the fact that automation is starting to become much more common as a means to reduce the tactical workload within agencies. And 3 is modernizing the tools within an agency is linked to productivity and the quality of talent that they are able to retain. So Steve, before we get into the review of our findings, would you be able to give our audience a brief definition of digital transformation?
Sure. So when we talk about digital transformation, I want to start first with something that everyone has to deal with as an organization in the government, wherever you are, right? So this idea of change and transformation. When we think about transformation, we think about it in 2 different manners. We can either be involved with transformation from the initiation phase, meaning we start the actual transformation, or we're actually reacting to some of the changes that are happening and the transformation that's happening. When we look at the causes of the transformation, in this instance, when we talk about digital transformation, it's the technology that's actually causing us to change. But there are other factors that may cause transformation in an organization. They might be something like regulations that you need to comply with, so it causes a massive transformation. It also might be culture of the organization or the employee needs, right? So we need something different in organizations to meet either a cultural need or an employee demand. And then if we were talking about outside federal government, you might also have something like mergers and acquisitions. But since we're talking government, we don't necessarily need to deal with that one. What we need to deal with is the actual transformation that the technology is having on us as well. So that's what we talk about when we say digital transformation, right? So it has to do with dealing with the changes that new technologies are coming. That might be the cloud. That might be something like software as a service. Increasing automation where you had to have so many people do this manual task. Technology might be allowing you to do something differently. You know, examples of that might be artificial intelligence or machine learning. So those rote tasks that you typically relied on personnel to do, you don't necessarily need to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you eliminate the needs for those individuals. What it does mean is that you do things a little bit differently and you might change their skill set, right? That allows the breaking down of the silos, the organizational silos, and the actual ability to take all that information and gain some really deep insights into what's going on in the organization and how you're interacting with the technology and the transformation. So I don't know if that gives you like a comprehensive idea, but when we talk about digital transformation, we're really talking about technology changes that you must make in order to do this. And this was an interesting thing that we found in the study this year, and I'll let Andrew talk to you a little bit about that, but I think we're going to go moving into the live poll. And Andrew, do you want to start the, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that definition. So at this point, we'd like to hear from you in the audience. Are you pursuing a digital HR transformation within your agency? So you can see our answer options are yes, we are currently working on this. We're planning to begin transformation within the next 12 months. And lastly, no, we're not currently pursuing a digital transformation strategy. So I'll give you in the audience another 15 or so seconds to submit your responses, and then I'll ask you, Steve, to take a look and see if you can comment a little bit on what we find when we take a look at the results.
Sure.
Great, so I'll give our audience members about 5 more seconds to think about their response here.
So they just click on the button and hit submit, right?
That's right. And here we go. Here are our results. So, Steve, could you please take a look and see what you make of this?
Sure. So something that I didn't get a chance to say in the beginning is I work for Cornerstone OnDemand, but my history has been in the Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service. So I have the benefit of both seeing the federal space, the government space, and also the private sector space. And what you're seeing, generally speaking, in very vague terms, is the private space adopting to change and adapting to change more rapidly and more frequently than the government sector. And there's a number of different reasons that happens. But what we're seeing now, and what we're seeing with the study that is coming out today, and also in your survey results, is that there are a lot more people that no longer can ignore the changes that are happening in terms of digital transformation or technology impacts to the actual work. And this really rings true with folks because now these changes and the needs for change are actually making its way through the organizational, whether it's bureaucracy or whether it's constraints or fear or whatever. We're now seeing these efforts in digital transformation make its way through that and really have an impact on how organizations and government entities do their work. So it's I'm not surprised by this. I think this is right in line with where I think a lot of the agencies are now. They're beginning the change management efforts that they need to begin in order to adopt these technologies, overcoming their fear, whether it's security risks, whether it's, unfamiliar with the technology or just, not been exposed to it. Those barriers are being broken down, and we're seeing a lot more organizations not dip their toe into it, but let's say wade into the waters of the digital transformation. So really interesting and really on point, I think, with what's going on. So yeah.
Excellent.
Andrew,
so with that, yeah, thank you, Steve. So yeah, let's take a look at some of the findings from our actual report. The first is around staff development needs, which we have seen are currently spread very evenly across several categories. Interestingly for us, while succession planning is still one of our most significant challenges, the importance of new technology systems actually grew by 9% year over year. So I'd like to go to our panelists and see their reaction to where they find need within their own experience. And I'd like to start asking you, Beverly, What do you make of this data, and how does it reflect on your own personal experiences?
So based on my experience, I would agree that this digital transformation is happening, and it's happening in the government too. Just as a matter of fact, we got our first email from our IT team about the changes that's coming forth with our data management system as it relates to record retention, how we onboard our new employees to mandatory trainings. We're definitely seeing a trend towards digital and technology. So, Tawana, what are you guys doing in your organization?
So I put that we were doing a lot of digital transformation as well. I think initially we started out with grand ideas, and that has reality kind of set in. So we're moving a little slower than we thought. One of the issues I think that we've had is to kind of purchase this new technology or put out new technology without actually changing some of our HR processes. And so we're running into that as a roadblock right now. But we are looking at ways to figure out how to do not just better succession planning, but just strategic workforce planning overall. And so I think it's a total culture shift for us in how we do business, and the automation is actually making things a lot easier. Samantha, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Sure. Yeah, I would introduce to the folks on the line the idea of the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014, the FISMA, if you've heard it. If you haven't familiarized yourself with the FISMA and you're in the federal space, it is what's driving a lot of the change in systems, in technology, and undergirding a lot of, at least from the Department of Education, we're doing a lot of system updates, a lot of variation that's being driven by the FISMA and the requirements that are now being created out of this heightened awareness to cybersecurity. And so that's a pretty important piece of legislation that you need to know and you kind of be tracking along with, because it doesn't just kind of affect your chief information officer area of the world. It really has touch point across the agencies and hitting all of your mission requirements, and even tie-ins with NARA and the records management and how we do that now. So we are doing a lot of, and we did before as part of our space modernization, we did a lot of digitization of paper records. And I know as a federal government, we went through a huge process when we made electronic our official personnel files. That was back in, 09, 12. And so in that period, but then there was another wave of just digitizing files that were paper files that needed to be, in order to regain that space and that footprint back. So there are a lot of areas that we can look at, but I do want to introduce that piece of information because I know a lot of times when you're not in the CIO realm of an agency, sometimes you're a little detached from that. But I think that's something that all managers need to familiarize themselves with in the federal sector.
So Samantha, that's an excellent point. Can I add on to that? Because I want to clarify in case folks are not familiar with what FISMA is. FISMA is the way that the government is addressing one of the chief obstacles of accepting technology, and that is security, right? So OPM, GSA, and OMB came together and they put together requirements, and FISMA, I think, is over 200 plus checks that you must go through, and this is security checks, right? You must do this, you must do that, you must do this as a technology provider. And what they do is it's like a test, right? So it's the government testing this software, this technology, to make sure that there aren't security risks. And what they do is they become FISMA certified. And your FISMA certification is essentially, look, I've passed my security test, such and such agency. will you accept me as not a threat, right? So you can accept me as not a threat because I've gone through all these checks and passed them successfully. And that's what FISMA is. So I really appreciate you bringing that point. I should have raised it, but it's the government's way of addressing the security risk and the security concerns and doing it once as opposed to making it doing every other agency go through those security checks every time. So they do it for you and you can accept their certification through that. Thanks, Samantha. And I know we wanted to bring Jennifer into the conversation. Jennifer, what's going on in the USDA Forest Service with that?
Thank you for that. Similar to what many of my colleagues have shared today, as we work through the IT modernization work and effort in order to respond to two things. One is to the security, the modernization, and the ability to meet the needs of our customers as we focus on engagement in the digital age and the impacts that that has in delivering very efficient and effective services to those that come to us for services within our mission. A couple of things have already been highlighted, but wanted to reinforce as well as we went to e-records and being able to reduce our physical footprint and create efficiencies and cost savings for our agencies as stewards of taxpayer dollars. That is something that we've seen a big improvement in looking at efficiencies in our processes, how we share information on our websites, as well as be able to engage with our customers to our revitalization of our websites and engagement with various constituent groups as we reach across the federal sector to share information collaboratively where we have shared services for meeting some of our joint customer needs.
Excellent. Let's take a look at the next finding here. This is around the implementation of new solutions. So we've seen in our research that the implementation of many new solutions is underway in the majority of organizations, reflecting the priority of digital transformation. In fact, over 60% of our respondents will have on-demand trading resources, as well as a digital transformation in full swing within the next 12 months. So what I'd like to ask is, how can the improvement of the technology infrastructure impact agency performance? And actually, I'd love to hear again from you, Jennifer, to start us off on this topic.
Thank you. One of the areas that we're looking at is related to efficiencies, effectiveness, and delivering the services to those that reach out to us, also internal to the organization as well as external groups. And so the way that we're focusing on performance is being able to look at the value of the work that we're providing to our end users or our customers, again, both internal and external to the organization. And how do we engage with folks in the current environment where we have generational shifts and we have all generations represented within the agencies, and also for those that are looking to us for services in this digital environment. It is rapidly changing, and so being able to invest those dollars in a way that is efficient and effective and can be brought to market in short term meeting those security needs is where we're focusing our efforts as part of our customer experience. We're going out and engaging with those stakeholder groups, our customers and end users, to be able to test what that looks like and be able to modernize the way and we engage with our customers and the way that we enforce and support and train our employees to meet them where they are.
Thanks, Jen. Sam, what do you think about this?
I agree that there is a lot of technology that's being infused into, at least from the federal seat from where I sit, we have a lot of modernization going on. The term itself, you almost get it almost gets diluted in the usage of everything that we're trying to do all at once. One of the things that I get concerned about when we're improving technology is there's improving technology and then there is always the human element, and I'm a human resources person, so I'm always driving back to that. How is your human resource doing with the new technological change? And if you intended for this resource to assist them or to replace them, or to, kind of migrate to some hybrid of that variation? How is that going? And so within our department, and I know a lot of other departments, we are finding the rigors of and the challenges of once you've bought a system and the system is not working the way you intend it to, and how you improve the technology, but then you still have to improve the actual technology to fit your needs. And so it's kind of the rub against, this is a great thing to help the mission of the agency to, make us more effective, and how we can run reports, or how we can gather information and data more quickly, or cross-cut it across variations in the operational pieces of our organization. But you also have to look at how that's impacting employee performance. And that means, how are we really training our employees? And I love that folks are going to on-demand training, but are your employees using it? Do they have time in the time it takes to bring a new system online? My teams brought on 2 major new systems last year for the entire agency. And it's a process of making sure users know how to use it, your super users know how to use it, getting acclimated with the technology, so that it's not just something you have and have procured, but that it's something that's of use. Because to me, the realization of the budgetary kind of fix, or the budgetary saving, is not really realized until both the system is in place and the system user is comfortable with what we've put in place now. I know that's from a federal standpoint. Maybe Tawana can speak to what they're doing in her agency.
So I kind of agree, being focusing solely on the engineers and scientists that work for the Army at the federal level. We haven't really invested a lot in on-demand training, considering that most of our folks are in labs or in the field. We had a hard enough time trying to get them to, check an email or something like that throughout their day. And so some of the initiatives that we're really focused on is performance management. We recently launched a new performance management system called DPMAP, and just making sure that the rollout of that system is successful. Again, not just looking at this new tool that we have that's full of great automation, and you're able to record and have record several meetings with your employees, but also making sure that the employee and supervisor are engaging on a continuous basis. And another initiative that we've kind of invested in is looking at our top performers. Seeing that we focus on those STEM career fields, we tend to lose a lot of our top performers to industry. And so we're looking at ways to retain our top performers. What are the things that these kids, when they get out of school, what are they looking to do once they get their job? And are we fulfilling their career passions as well? And so those are some of the things that we're looking at from the Army perspective. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Beverly.
I wanted to piggyback on the human connection as it relates to technology and my experience working for local government with our engineer sector. So oftentimes we'll push out, here's this great new piece of technology, and there's the expectation that while you're out in the field, you have access to your time card or daily report and whatever else you're supposed to use, without the consideration that there may not be assets. They may not have, what am I trying to say? They can't connect to the system. And while we give them all the equipment it depends on what area they are. So to that point about pushing this stuff out on learning demand, on learning demand, can the people actually use the systems that we're putting in place? And I think that's where we're finding the problem. And also budgetarily, what I've observed is the city will push stuff out, but then the scope grows and grows and grows with the need. And oftentimes we learn the need after it's been pushed out, and we can't use the systems as effectively as we would like. But what I'm also seeing, too, is we're catching up. The city seems to be putting a lot of effort and time and money into this. And so while systems may catch on slowly with enough push and adding on to that scope of work, we're getting it, if that makes sense. And so we still have this gap, though. What do we do with our folks when they're out in the field and they don't have reception, and yet there's the expectation that they're supposed to take X training in a matter of days? And if they're not, we're an internal service department, so these folks have to be billable. And when they're sitting in an office taking a 2-hour mandatory training, they're not billable at that point. So we're still trying to figure those things out in the city of San Diego. So, Steve, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I hear you say San Diego, and I'm wishing that I was there. I'm actually in Las Vegas, where they're actually getting snow for the first time in over a decade. So I'm a little jealous of the San Diego thing. This question is complicated and also very interesting, right? So we're talking about the changes of digital transformation, but we're also talking about changes in how people learn, right? So there's this terminology that I've heard Josh Burson, if you're familiar with him, use, and I think it really captures what it is we're talking about. What he talks about is it's no longer acceptable, as Beverly just mentioned, to have people sitting in an office space or going off to a classroom to do whatever training they actually need. What they need instead is they need to learn in the flow of work, and in the flow of work is what Josh Burson says. And what that means is this on-demand training component. I want to be able to take it at the point of need. When I need it, I want to be able to take it. And regardless of whether or not it is in the office or out of the office or even connected to internet, right? So there are technologies out there that allow you to take stuff offline, right? So Cornerstone has a number of customers that actually are in remote parts of the world, and they don't actually have internet, but they still need to complete their performance reviews or their training, mandatory training that they need to complete, or they want to develop their folks even if they're not in line. The technology is out there, so we're seeing the changes in the way people consume content, but we're also seeing different skill sets that are actually being met. It's interesting because one of the studies that came out in 2017 was from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And in that study, it said that 65% of the children entering primary school today, that is back in 2017, and I'm sure the number is higher. So 65% of those children entering primary school today will hold jobs that do not yet exist. So we're seeing the changes for the actual work and the learning happening, but we're also seeing the actual work shifting to different things. And according to the study from Bureau of Labor Statistics, some of the things that we're going to ask our children to do don't exist right now. And I think that holds true across the board, whether you're private sector, government, city, state, and local. Everybody is going to have to be adjusting the way they do the work that they do. In fact, a lot of it, there's the same study that actually talked about the way our economy is shifting. Our economy is shifting now, and this is relevant to government as well, because the majority of the work that we do is not goods-producing jobs. They're instead service-related jobs. So we don't need you to make widgets. We need you to provide widgets in a service-like capacity and provide the service that we actually need, as opposed to create me a widget. Does that make sense? I think it's really startling to see in light of this, and also the live poll that we took about the changes that technology is actually having about it. And it really makes sense. Think about your personal life. How do you actually consume content, right? So how do you, open your iPad or your device or whatever it is that you use, and how do you actually communicate, collaborate? And do you wait for a specific time to do it, or do you need it on demand? right? So those types of things and needs that we have in our private lives are also making its way into its work life, our work life, and it's changing the way we work, and it's changing the actual work that we do. I hope that was clear. I don't want to toss too much out there, but I think it's just really fascinating the impact that technology is having on both the way we do the work and also the way we learn. So very interesting, and very interesting to hear the panel and their reaction as well.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm actually looking at the next slide now, which is another finding that we've had. This is something that we've seen year over year in a sense. We see the majority of respondents are looking to maximize performance while usually maintaining some vestige of budget neutrality. So only a third of respondents who we reached out to this year will have more budget to invest in talent management initiatives in 2018 relative to the prior year. Basically, this leads us to ask, what are some of the ways that we can continue to improve our strategies while being sensitive to budgets? And I think it would be interesting to potentially tie that in to some of the capabilities that we've been discussing already in our conversation related to technology. Essentially, what it boils down to is there a way to do more, in a sense, with the same amount, or even in some cases, do more with less? And I'd like to start with you, Tawana, if you could just comment on your thoughts around this topic.
Well, personally, we are currently in a state of wondering if we're going to get funding for our training and professional development programs, recruiting, our internship programs, and we're usually on the cutting board. So we're always having to figure out how to do more with less, or at least do what they tasked us to do with those budget constraints. And as we all know, training, professional development is never on the top of, I would say, the senior leaders' priority list, because mission is very important. And so some of the things that we've tried to work on is launching new professional development type programs. One of the ones that we came up with was the Senior Enterprise Talent Management and Enterprise Talent Management programs, and also our Enterprise Learning Program. And so these are focused on, like I said earlier, we've noticed that we're losing a lot of our top talent to industry. They pay more. Maybe they seem like they're doing cooler stuff. And so how can we put those individuals who are outperforming and doing well, and show them that we care by investing in them even further. So a lot of times we invest in the beginning when they first come through the door, and then they perform, and we kind of leave them to fend for themselves. So these programs are opportunities for us to take those individuals. We put them with other senior leaders. We put them on different projects, because a lot of times they do get on board working on some of the same projects. And this program has been really successful for us. One of the challenges we have, though, is you're asking managers to release these top performers so that they can continue to be trained and developed, yet they're already experiencing their own financial constraints and budget constraints as well. So who's going to be doing that work as we pull them away to do this, these great training programs? Excuse me. But we've also, talked with supervisors and managers internally, doing things like job swaps that don't cost anything, and different mentorship programs, improving those mentorship programs, since those are things that, again, are low funded. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to, I believe, Samantha.
I'll take it. Yeah, I agree that we have to. It's the hard question of how do you do more with less money, right? Because we're not in an environment where budgets are growing. We're not in an environment where people are like, yes, we will fund all of your requests. So you really have to be creative as a leader, as a manager, as a thought provider for your entity, whether it's your agency, your organization, whatever it may be. In my own team, I start looking at trends. I look at trends across government. I look at trends in the nonprofit sector. I look at, non-government sector. I look at private sector to see where are we going. Where is the, the rub points for my organization, and how can I get information to my team in real time who's doing critical work and high profile work and already understaffed, trying to train those people. And then also, it's an important point that I bring into this conversation, because my retirement team and I are trying to infuse it into more conversations, which is, we have a tremendous amount of folks who are retirement eligible and who are now choosing to retire. We went through a period around 2007 to 2009 where a lot of people who were eligible decided to stay in the marketplace, in the, government for an extended period of time. But we're reaching that critical zone now where we know 10,000 baby boomers are eligible to retire every single day. They turn 65, and so the amount of talent that's walking out of the door, the amount of knowledge just walking out of the door, it does create this kind of critical learning crisis of needing to bring up to speed any employees you have in the incumbent positions, and then new employees that you have coming on, getting that information to them quickly. And so you do have to be creative. I found that there are a lot of free resources that are out there, opportunities like this to come to learning exchanges within from different perspectives, using things in the federal space. OPM has a YouTube site full of free trainings that are really quality information for folks to get. There are a lot of resources. You just have to take the time to look. So what I've done in my own personal schedule is I carve out time to find, create, and kind of barter for types of training that I think will be effective for my team to push them forward in a way that's also not a waste of time, because training for the sake of training is not, to me, that's not budget neutral. What's budget neutral is if you're giving someone some quality training that will be helpful for them to spur on whatever the work is that they do in their organization. So to me, I know that it's been really good to say a lot that we want to keep things budget neutral, but I think at some point we have to grapple with the real idea that in order to have what you need from a standpoint of not having learning deficits in your organization, you're going to have to invest money. In my own personal agency at Ed, we made a commitment not to cut our training budget. It was a very big decision that was made by our senior leadership, but one that we wholeheartedly supported because we understood the value and the need to put that money on the line for making sure the team that you have in those incumbent positions are properly trained, so that when those folks who are deciding to retire start retiring, and that wave of baby boomers, that doesn't stop till 2030. So we've got a chunk of time here that we are going to be losing institutional knowledge from organizations for at least the next 10 to 15 years. We got to really address it for real, and that means putting energy, creativity, and good thought, but also putting some dollars on training. So where you can find a dollar, I think a dollar is best invested in your training program.
Okay.
I will throw to Beverly. Beverly, what do you think about that?
Samantha, I agree, because I'm in training. And I wanted to say that one of the shifts that I noticed are the skills that we're looking at. Steve, you alluded to that earlier. So we are looking for, in our classifications, for people who have this digital information, this knowledge. So oftentimes I'll run into people and they'll say, hey, I want to be in training, because they still think of training as standing up in front of people. And I say, no, we're looking for folks who can do X, who knows technology and understand it, and even in our financial and our engineering folks too. So it's already been said, and I'll say it again, that we have folks that sometimes have to do double duty. There's an expectation that they're going to be doing, quote, engineering work, which in our field is inspection, and they may have to build a website for someone, learn some system, and train other folks on how to use that. And that's how we're literally trying to maximize those dollars here. What do you know? And I also think as it relates to the succession planning and, quote, baby boomers leaving, I think that things are changing at such a rapid rate that as someone who's been in their career for a long time, the things that I did know are becoming obsolete, if that makes sense. It's not to say that there's not any value in having historical knowledge or institutional knowledge, but I find myself having to stay on the cutting edge of things and YouTube videos in my time, in my spare time, using online demand so that I can stay abreast of what's going on as well. So I think that, yes, there's a knowledge gap, and I also think that the folks that are behind me generationally are catching up as well. So I think there's some good news, and there's some things to be concerned about as well, too. So I don't know, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that?
I think it might be good to hear from Jennifer, perhaps.
Sure. I agree with everything that you shared, and it's very thoughtful as we're working to lead those strategic initiatives, alignment to our program dollars, and meeting the needs of those that will come behind us. I think one of the key areas that we have focused on when we really crack the nut of talent management, looking at training and communication, and looking at those core competencies and skill gaps that many of us have done assessments on over the years, and really being able to look at where are those emerging fields in IT. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is really keying into the people side of change as we help folks to identify where they fall within their retirement planning, looking at it from an investment in dollars in the technology, and how far do we go as an agency in stretching that envelope, because we do, as I mentioned earlier, have all generations represented in the organization. And one of the things as we come back off of, for many of us, what was an extended furlough, we really took the time to check in and connect, make sure that folks were strategically aligned, knew where they fit in their performance and meeting the mission needs of the agency, reconnecting and rebaselining a bit around what are those high priority targets as we look towards the end of the fiscal year within the budget conditions that we all find ourselves in the federal space, and really becoming clear on highest priority actions and renegotiating what are my real needs to be successful going forward. So we've had some real thoughtful dialogue in meeting people where they are, and really evaluating where we can approach things from being more efficient, being more effective, and really, as I shared earlier, where in that heart of the word service, as we talk throughout this presentation today with our colleagues, is we're all in this together. Where can we leverage each other's gifts and talents through shared training with our customer service boards, our federal executive boards, and interagencies where we have multiple federal agencies. Also our industries with our universities and community colleges across the different cohort groups. And we've had a lot of success in the pain points being high enough that we come together leveraging each other's gifts and talents and training, whether it's facilities, whether it's trainers, whether it's the new LMS systems that we're pushing out information, and then having classroom training and developing adjunct instructors for specific topics or needs to fill those specific gaps. So I would encourage everybody to look at the thought leaders on the call as well as those that are in the audience today and reach out to one another as we're all grappling in this space together, and we have really worked to leverage the strengths with each other, and I have found that folks are very ready to engage in that kind of shared services. So wanted to thank the colleagues for their comments because I agree with all that they've said today.
And thanks for that, Jennifer. I think that's a really excellent thing to share with everybody here on the call today. That brings us actually to our next piece of information that we gathered from our report around where needs for improvement still lie in the federal workforce. And this is based on sentiment that we've really seen year over year again. Similar numbers around what people would like to improve, with 64% of respondents communicating that they feel that they're not exactly where they would like to be in terms of executing their missions. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel they're doing things poorly, but I think we can all agree that sometimes it's impossible to be satisfied when what you're working on is, so vital to the continued success of the missions of our agencies. So what I'd like to ask is, how can you relate to the need for continuous improvement? Perhaps some things that you have your eye on as pet projects or overall projects that you're implementing. Maybe share a strategy before passing it on to your colleague as we take a look at this area. So Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind starting us off again, what do you see as an area for continuous improvement, and could you take us through that?
Sure. We've invested heavily in continuous process improvement, looking at, as several of our folks said, making sure that we're not losing people in the digital modernization, the IT modernization, and really the investment in systems. We tended to run into many problems when we put too much focus on the system without looking at the process, the people, and the end user experience. And as was shared with some of our colleagues earlier, you're talking about a time frame to market that is extensive for systems. It has a high degree of investment, testing, and rollout, and we've adopted more of an agile project approach to being able to address and make improvements as we need to, as we're having a continual churn and need to reinvest in how we meet our customers where they are, whether they're out in the field with connectivity issues, as was shared earlier, training gaps, or folks that just really are not into or insecure about engaging through the technology and don't have that experience. Their focus is more related to the on-the-ground mission work. So having to really take a strategic pause and realign our processes, our systems, our technology, our communication, and the way that we work with our customers aligned to performance targets, efficiencies, and cost savings is really where we are spending most of our time focusing at this juncture.
Thanks, Jennifer. So let's hear from Beverly. What do you think about this topic?
Well, one of my concerns is the leadership gap. I know we just kind of talked about that a little while ago, but the soft skills. So as we move towards this push towards technology, what's missing, and I don't want to get into any stereotypes about millennials and looking at their phones, but we are seeing, too, that interpersonal skills and workplace etiquette and how you address issues or conflicts and solve for those things, and implementing programs to kind of offset the digital stuff like mentoring and shadowing and coaching, and making room for those types of programs so that employees can feel engaged and on purpose, if you will. So I think it's a challenge trying to juxtapose the two needs of trying to get the most with less, trying to fill the gap of leadership, and at the crest of all this, it's people, and how do we engage and talk to one another in the workplace and training our this new generation on those skills. So that's where I am in my career right now, and those are some of the interests that I'm focusing on, as well as, you know, mobile and digital technology too. So I'll pass it on to Samantha.
Thank you. There are a lot of areas. If I could distill it down, I'll say there's always a need for continuous improvement in creativity, right? And what you know, your knowledge. And I like to have a question or a challenge for myself. Personally, the question I'm grappling with right now is that step necessary? There's a lot of redundancy. There are a lot of things that we've put in place that sound good, look good on paper, but don't make sense for the user or for the customer. And so I'm grappling with that and all the processes with my team right now. Is there a way that we can make this not just more efficient, but make more sense? And so I ask myself a set of questions. I say, you know, what do I know? What do I understand? Not just, you know, kind of surfacely know it, but what do I really understand about what we're doing in this certain area? And then what does my team know? What do they understand? What does my customer know? What do they understand? And then what do my senior leaders know? What do they understand? And so it's a way to kind of look at something from every angle and perfect your process, not just so it's better for you or your team, but that it's better for your customer. It's better for your leadership. It's better for you as the leader of whatever team you're leading. And it's better for the person who's having to do the work. And so I think customer service, creativity, that idea of knowledge management being not just something we know, but something we truly understand, being a vital piece of us moving into the future. And it just allows us to, you know, kind of take that shift of, I just feel like a lot of times we have really great conversations and ideas are thrown out there, but they're not grounded, or there's no truth in the conversation about all of the impact that's going to happen, and finding ways to have that conversation but not let it delay or you know, kind of apprehend the need for the change and the evolving in our agencies and organizations. So that's, I could go on, but I'm sure that Tawana would have something she'd like to add.
Thank you. I do actually wanted to talk about some of the things that we are doing, or one of the to tackle one of the issues that we have, which is recruiting the best talent. Our STEM fields are very competitive. Like I said, we compete with industry in terms of salary, in terms of the things that they can do. And so we are trying to launch a new marketing campaign. We got videos rolling out, and also focusing on different geographical areas that we haven't looked at before, and making sure that the students, while they're in school, or those individuals who have served a couple of years in the military and who have recently got out and looking for civilian careers, that they know what Army engineers and scientists do, because that's not the first thing that they think of when they think about the Army. And so we want to showcase some of our labs, make sure they know about our research and development centers that are all across the country, and the work that we're doing with industry and academia, so that it is a place that they want to work. And in addition to that, getting after our hiring practices in general. A lot of times we get that top performer to come in, and we got them in for an interview, but then we lose them because our hiring practices take so long. And then we can't get them on board soon enough, and somebody else grabs them up, whether it's, you know, Air Force or Navy, or somebody in the private sector. So those are some of the things that we're looking at right now, just being more creative and innovative in how we approach recruiting. And going back to, like I said, strategic workforce planning and succession planning, looking to see what skill sets we actually need in the future, and not just hiring behind the folks that are retiring today. You know, cyber is really big right now, human factors, engineering, and things of that nature. What are they actually studying in school? And we're going to have to step out of our comfort zone, I think, and you know, stop doing business the way that we've always done it and say, oh, well, we just put out a job announcement and, you know, we'll get some interns to show up that way, but actually going out and doing true recruiting for the skill sets that we need. And with that being said, I think I might be passing it back to Andrew.
Yes, thanks, Tawana. Let's take a look at another piece of data. So before we get into this piece, which is around automation, I just want to point out that we're coming up towards the end of the hour, but you know, since this conversation is so rich, and we do have some more information to cover, including another one of our live polls, any of the audience members who are on, please be invited to stay. We're actually going to be pushing past our official end time and you know, continuing the conversation. So there's plenty of more to listen to and more learning to share. Anyone who's thinking of signing off but maybe has a little bit more time to spend with us is absolutely welcome and encouraged to do so. So with that in mind, I'd like to take a look at this piece of information. So we've been discussing, you know, digital transformations. One of these big components is the use of automation to unlock additional time for productivity. In our data that we've gathered in our report, we can see respondents are in the midst of implementing automation, and in this particular context, to assist with compliance, which they reported takes up between 26 to 50% of their time and resources within a very large 61% of respondents' agencies. So clearly this is a significant area where this can be leveraged. What I'd like to ask is, you know, have any of you on our panel begun to experiment with automation, potentially in relation to your own compliance efforts? Beverly, would you be able to start us off around this topic?
So while Beverly is
you know what? Actually, I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what, Tawana, excuse me. I think you expressed interest in this. My apologies to Beverly. But would you mind kicking this off?
In terms of automation, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. To reintroduce the question and the topic, basically we're looking at, you know, automation is clearly impacting a lot of our respondents. One of the areas that they said that they were focused on applying automation was compliance in particular. You know, generally these routine tasks that can easily be, you know, handled by a program, which in turn allows for more time to, you know, think strategically and implement some of the things that people maybe are more passionate about. But again, I'd love to, you know, hear from you on the panel, starting with you, Tawana. Has that been your experience? Are you looking at this as an area to implement new tech? And yeah, take it away, please, if you don't mind.
So personally, I feel like more automation in the HR field, in our current field, would be easier. Like I said, we do a lot of training and professional development and try to look at it from a strategic level because we're managing, that's my computer, 17,000 engineers and scientists. And so we don't have that one-on-one kind of, you know, communication with them. And so we don't have a lot of time to do the strategic planning that we should be doing because we're, you know, approving training applications or going through endless kind of red tape in the systems that we do have in place. And one of the things that I did want to talk about earlier when we were talking about automation, so it seems like we'll launch these great systems or some various contractors will come in and show us these great programs that will improve the way we manage our workforce. But then we either don't take it on fully, whether that's funding or just completely embracing the system. And so then we tend to blame the system. You know, oh, we got this new training program out here where employees are able to look at their entire career dashboard, and supervisors can then recommend things to them, and senior leaders can recommend things to them, but then we don't fully fund those various portions of the automation tool. And so that's one of the things that we're struggling with in my organization is I feel like a lot of the employees lose faith and confidence in the system, and so then they're not using it to its full potential because we as an Army entity aren't really using it and launching it in its full potential, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Samantha, would you like to comment on this?
Absolutely. So automation definitely presents the opportunity for increased productivity, right? So with one of my teams, my performance management team, we had some very laborious manpower draining processes where things had to be done by an individual contributor and manually done. And it just takes a lot of time. So in processing those things or putting actions through and things of that nature, it really slows down the capability of that one individual to really get certain things done. So we brought on a new performance management system. We started the process, all the FISMA stuff, back in early 2018, and we brought it online at the beginning of FY19. And so what we've seen, and I think what you'll see, is there is definitely an increase in the productivity that my team can now cover in this realm, right? But there's a time frame, and I think we do much to my colleague's point. You will have I think there's a desire to have a system work 100% immediately. And that's just not the life cycle of how you bring something on. And so one of the things that I think you're looking at is a system that can grow with your need. I think that a lot of times we do get these dazzling presentations of systems that can solve every problem known to man, but the reality is that you still have to have manpower to deal with that system. And the system, much like a good pair of shoes, you've got to break it in for the needs of your agency. And so I think one of the ways that we really look at whether or not whether automation is really gonna be worth the cost, because I'm making those decisions of, are we going to pay the cost for these user licenses or this contract or this interagency agreement or whatever it may be, this set of services through contract. I'm looking at the manpower hours that I can gain back from my staff so that they can have more time to do that strategic work, right? But also the life-work balance of bringing on a new system, and for that new system, the life of that system. So I think you look at the system in kind of phases. The phase of whether or not it's worth the cost analysis, the second phase being how long it's going to take to break that shoe in for your organization. And then on the phase 3, which I think everybody kind of looks straight to phase 3, which is when we get this system broken in for us, how can we retrieve that time, that energy, that reporting capability to really help us break silos? Because I think that when you have automation, it allows you to gain information more quickly. It allows you to provide your customers different information that will allow them to cross-cut things with the information they wouldn't have normally have had. And so that's very useful for them as well. And so I think in general, just making sure you're looking at the full life cycle of not just the purchasing of the automation, but the bringing it online, and also what it'll look like when it's working the way you anticipate it will work.
Well, I didn't want to be the one to have to follow such a great analogy of the shoe analogy of breaking in a shoe for new technology. So kudos to you on that one, Samantha. That one definitely gets the analogy of the day today, because I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I think the automation component is something that we're all struggling with and struggling to deal with because of the technology. I heard Beverly mention it earlier, and there's probably bears mention about the generational differences. There's a couple key facts that are going on in the workforce today, and I'm sure everyone is aware of it, but I just want to toss out some facts to you that was that I found. In one of them, it was called The 100-Year Life by Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott. And they said, since 1840, there has been an increase in life expectancy of 3 months for every year. So that means that they're growing the life expectancy 3 months every year. And today's millennials currently actually have a 50% chance of living to 100 plus. This might not actually seem like it's related to automation, but it really is, right? So first off, you got to deal with the generational bias that I heard Beverly mention as well. So that's a key component when we talk about compliance training, and that is definitely something that we're going to need to address as we see more and more generations grow old and elderly into the actual workforce. But also what it's doing is it's changing the jobs that we actually need. And you heard this from Tawana and Samantha and a number of different speakers throughout this, and Jennifer mentioned it as well. So some of the most in-demand jobs for the Emerging Jobs Report last year indicated that the #1 job that we're going to need is a machine learning engineer. We're going to need data scientists. We need customer success managers. We need big data developers. We need, for example, Jennifer's title, the guest experience manager, right? This customer experience manager and how we actually use it. So it goes to, instead of being these hard and fast skills that you went to school for and studied, it goes to a little bit more of a softer skill. So that changes our capabilities that are needing, right? So now we're starting to look for folks that have high adaptability, are a good culture fit, are able to collaborate, have great leadership skills regardless of where they fall in the organization, have outstanding growth potential as an organization and as individuals, and are able to prioritize effectively. So this automation component is actually forcing us to actually fill our jobs or focus in on jobs that we weren't exposed to or experiencing in the workforce before. So I think it's interesting to see all the downstream effects that the automation, not only increasing compliance or productivity, but also forcing us to do things differently and do different stuff completely. So yeah, interesting facts. So Andrew, let's go to I think we have another live poll, right?
That's correct, Steve. So yeah, let's get that underway right now. For those of you who are with us right now, this poll is centered around the importance of automation. Again, just what we were discussing. So in your own estimation, what is the importance of automation in helping achieve your productivity goals? So we'll give you several moments to decide if it's highly important, of average importance to you, somewhat important, or just generally not important at all. So you can select your responses on the screen, click submit, and then in just another moment, we'll be taking a look at those results, and I'll be asking Steve to basically discern what he thinks of them. So we'll take another about 5 seconds for you to submit your responses, and then we'll take a look and see what we've got. All right. So Steve, I think the answer is pretty clear. It's very important for the majority of our respondents, but maybe you could give us a little more color around these results.
Yeah, I mean, this makes perfect sense, right? Incorporating the technology that's out there. And I think it goes back to things that Jennifer, Samantha, and even Tawana mentioned. Beverly, I think, addressed earlier in her comments. It's right. It's doing things differently, more effectively. I think Samantha mentioned just because you have processes and the way you've always done it, is not necessarily the way you're going to be able to do it moving forward. In the earlier slide, we talked about compliance, and everyone has to deal with compliance and the types of training in terms of what you must do as an organization, right? So essentially, you have 2 types of training: the traditional diversity and compliance. It's something you got to do. It's often simplistic and process-driven. It tends to be theoretical content and lacks sort of tactical approaches for initiating any sort of change, right? Under diversity training, the goal is to promote a culture of respect and belonging, but does that really do it? Is it actually improving productivity We often find that the content in diversity training is abstract, divisive, and preachy almost. We also have compliance training where we're trying to protect employees' information, support ethical decisions, and overall reduce our risk to things, right? So when we talk about this in the traditional way of doing compliance training, it's dry, it's legalistic, it's patronizing, and there are problems with that, right? So the way we must deal with compliance is moving towards modern compliance and becoming more proficient in the actual delivery. And the way we actually talk about it at Cornerstone is we build our content and our compliance. Modern compliance is dealing with 4 pillars that provide meaningful reflection and action, right? Specifically, unconscious bias, right? So being aware of where our biases are and our blind spot and managing those. Bystander intervention, meaning reacting to troubling behavior as we encounter it. So give them the tools and stuff that they need to deal with that. Giving employees the empowerment to take ownership for the norms at every level, right? So it shouldn't be the manager or supervisor making sure there's compliance. It's everybody. It's everybody's job. And then also creating an environment that builds trust within teams. So this is due in large part with how we actually deliver this content, the automation, but it also is changing the actual content of what we're actually delivering. So not only is it changing the way we're technologically delivering it, but it's changing what it is we're actually delivering, right? So these numbers aren't surprising in that everyone's dealing with this. In fact, I have a button on my computer. It says, it's got the red circle with the X over it, and in the center it says, the way we always do things, right? And that's X'd out, right? We do it because this is the way we've always done it. That doesn't hold true, and it doesn't pass the test anymore. So you're seeing the scores reflect that.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. At this point, we'd love to hear some key takeaways from our panelists. And what that is essentially is, a single piece of advice that you can give to our listeners today regarding their missions in 2019, perhaps something that's near and dear to your heart, or something that you think is applicable in the context of our conversation here. But yeah, just briefly, an extra piece of value for those who are with us. And I'd love to get that started off with you, Jennifer, if you have just a comment to share, just a key takeaway for everybody here.
Sure. I'd like to just kind of set the stage in building a common language on the learning journey that we have been on. We have adapted an adaptive management approach to be responsive to what we have found over the last 9 years to be rolling tremendous change and being able to respond to continued constrained environments. And our leadership made a conscious choice to be able to evaluate what is the most important work to be doing for our customers and service in our name for service, and really be able to look at it from that perspective. And it has generated, with the investment, as was shared by Steve, those 4 pillars as we look at talent management, business transformation, and being able to create a safe environment for folks to step out and embrace some innovative approaches to not only our current mission, but our emerging missions in partnership with other agencies and also communities in that shared service approach. So the more that you can team and leverage each other's strengths, when you expand the pie, there's more abundance to share, and a lot of times it's just bringing people together to solve a common problem and focus on the people side of things. We find that most people in the government are very committed to the missions of the agencies that they serve in, very committed to service, and looking for opportunities to team and to partner in order to overcome a lot of the obstacles that we face every day.
Thanks a lot for that. Samantha, would you like to share your key takeaway?
Sure. I want to just give you one. So I'm gonna try here. I'm gonna go with drive your change. So I tell my team all the time, if someone gives you the keys, you don't get in the back of the car, you drive. And so I really want to encourage the folks who are with us today to not wait for your IT team to tell you how digital transformation is going to happen in your organization, or your, commissioner or your secretary or whoever it may be above you. and really start the conversation with yourself, your team, so that you get a generated answer that is more organic to the needs of your part of the organization. So a lot of times we get frustrated because we wait for someone to deliver to us an answer to our automation needs, when in fact you are empowered to find, to resource, and to develop those kinds of solutions within your own organization. So take on that responsibility. And I know we all have enough responsibilities to shake a stick at, but there's always a need for the creatives in the room to stand up and be creative no matter what seat you're sitting in. And so create those cross-cutting relationships within your organization. Go visit the folks and talk and go to some meetings that don't necessarily directly impact your day-to-day work, but do impact your day-to-day work. And those kinds of things, I think, will keep you on track for being in the world that we're in now. The missions of our agencies aren't changing, but the methodology for how we're gonna arrive at our mission and do our mission are definitely changing rapidly, and you've got to stay up to speed with that change.
Thanks a lot. Tawana, would you like to share your key takeaway?
Okay, sure. I think for me, just in terms of transformation, making sure that you are not the hurdle or the hindrance, whether it be something as simple as, being silent when they're asking for input, or actually being that roadblock. Just, take a step back and make sure that you aren't the person that is kind of keeping the change and transformation from occurring. And I know you said one, but my other thing would be just collaboration and sharing best practices in forums such as this one, and even within your organization. Those are my two takeaways, because I'm hard-headed.
Thank you. And then Beverly, I'd love to hear from you with your takeaway.
Okay, so I'll share a meme that was shared with me the other day. And that meme was said, the two things that people hate, things as they are and change. And we do. We have to accept things the way they are and at the same time accept change, because both things are happening. And being an optimist, I'll say that we can do this. We can adopt the soft skills that we're looking for, the leadership and succession planning, while we integrate digital technology in our systems as well. And even, I'm going to say government employees, it can happen, and it's happening simultaneously. So thank you for allowing me to be on this call, and I'm going to shift it to Steve.
Actually, I think we're going to move in the interest of time. It looks like we're going to move to close us out. Andrew, do you want to?
That's right, yeah. And thanks for sacrificing your time there, Steve. But in the interest of time, again, I want to just address a quick note to those individuals who had shared us questions for the Q&A. Unfortunately, while we won't have time to address your questions on the live stream, we will be taking a look at those in the back end and reaching out to you. So thanks again for your thoughtful input, and we really appreciate those of you who have stuck with us going over our allotted time for the day. And then I'd also like to point out that you can still claim your full copy of the report. It should be available to you within your console. Again, this is the 6th year that we've done this research. And if you're interested in following up on the conversation by looking at some of the statistics we were discussing, as well as many more, and more commentary from thought leaders, please go ahead and download that and give that a look. It's a great piece of content that we're proud to share with you today. I want to take a moment again, to thank the audience for attending this webinar, and mostly our amazing speakers as well, because they've stuck with us over the hour, and every minute was full of really great insights. So thanks again for that. We'd also like to hear your feedback on the presentation, so please participate in our very short survey to share any comments or suggested topics that you'd like us to discuss on future webinars. The presentation will be available for on-demand viewing, so you will receive the information to view the on-demand recording shortly. Please keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you. Have a great day to our presenters as well as to those who are on the line today. Wishing you a great end of the week, and thanks again for your time.